I waited years for Hellboy 3. After The Golden Army came out in 2008, every fan, just like me, was ready for a third and final chapter, Hellboy 3, to close out the story in proper Guillermo del Toro fashion. Del Toro had set up something massive. Hellboy was supposed to fulfill his apocalyptic destiny, face off against the end of the world, and go out holding his head high. It wasn't a maybe, it felt like a promise. Instead, we got silence, delays, and eventually nothing. And no, that 2019 reboot doesn't count. It came and went without a trace. It felt more like a studio checkbox than a real attempt to continue the story we cared about. I don't know about you, but I wanted Del Toro's Hellboy. The weird, sad, heavy one. The one with heart, folklore, and cat-loving demon drama. So what happened? Why did Hellboy 3 never make it to the screen? Why didn't it happen? Even when everyone, from Ron Perlman to the fans, wanted it. Turns out Del Toro had big plans. Big, weird plans. Hellboy embracing his true nature, a war against humanity, a half-demon prince finally stepping into the role he was born for. Yeah, that's what we missed. And this isn't about what could have been in some vague, dreamy way. Del Toro actually had the ending mapped out. But even with the cast on board and a director with 2 hit movies behind him, Hellboy 3 never got greenlit. The reason behind why it all fell apart? That's what we're digging into in this video. Let's get into what Del Toro had in mind and why the final chapter to one of the coolest comic book trilogies never got made. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Hellboy's glory days. A quick look back. Before the reboot fumbled the ball, Hellboy was killing it. Back in 2004, Guillermo del Toro gave us the first Hellboy, a film that didn't follow the usual superhero outline. And while it didn't light up the box office like Marvel's big hitters, it still made its mark. It wasn't sleek, it wasn't trying to be cool, it was weird, moody, and full of heart. People connected with it. The movie tossed us into a world where Nazi occultists raised a demon baby during World War II, only for that demon to grow up eating pancakes, filing his horns, and working for a secret government agency. Del Toro didn't sugarcoat anything. He leaned into the Monster Mash vibe and made it personal. Ron Perlman was Hellboy, and he absolutely owned the role. A red-skinned, horn-stubbed, half-grumpy, half-wisecracking, chain-smoking monster puncher with a big stone fist, while still vulnerable under all that red skin. Then 2008 brought the sequel, Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. And this time, Del Toro didn't hold back. He doubled down on fantasy, ditching the gothic vibe of the first film for a more fable-like world, and went full fairy tale freak show. Instead of Nazi necromancers, we got ancient elves, mechanical soldiers, and a war between races bubbling under the surface. The plot centered around Prince Nuada, a royal elf tired of humanity's garbage, ready to unleash an unstoppable mechanical army to wipe us out. So Hellboy obviously had to step in, and everything around him looked unbelievable. Troll markets, tooth fairies that actually ate teeth, tree gods bleeding floral explosions. Del Toro went all out, and it felt like watching someone's sketchbook explode onto the screen. It felt bigger, bolder, and way more personal. You could tell it was made with love, not studio checklists. The creature effects were mostly practical, and the costumes were a chef's kiss. It didn't matter if you were into comic book movies or not, the visuals alone sucked people in. Critics were into it, the fans were hyped, and by the end, everyone was ready for the third one. Especially since the Golden Army didn't exactly tie everything up. Hellboy quits the Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense, aka BPRD. Liz, his pyrokinetic girlfriend, was pregnant with twins. Yeah, Hellboy was going to be a dad. That alone changed everything we knew about him. The guy who punched monsters and ran from emotional connection now had to figure out how to raise kids while still trying to stop his demonic bloodline from burning the world down. That last frame had fans going nuts. Hellboy as a dad? Hellboy facing his destiny? There was so much left to explore. Plus, Hellboy 2 leaned way harder into his internal tug-of-war. He wasn't just fighting bad guys, he was fighting fate. That crown from the first film was the hint that he could become the beast of the apocalypse. That wasn't some far-fetched idea. Del Toro made sure it lingered. Every time Hellboy raised that massive right hand, you could tell he was afraid of where this was going. But then, silence. Studios stalled. Del Toro got busy, Perlman aged out, and that third movie, the one we were all waiting for, never got made. What's crazy is that over time, both movies built a serious cult following. Fans who were kids when the first movie came out started growing up and realizing how unique these films were. These stories had weight. Over the years, love for Del Toro's Hellboy only got louder. YouTube essays, Reddit threads, cosplay, fan art. People kept showing up for Big Red. And even though we never got that sequel, the demand never really faded. The 2019 reboot tried to bring the character back to theaters, but without Del Toro's fingerprints on it, it felt like an imitation. Meanwhile, fans kept pointing to the Golden Army's ending and asking the same thing. Where's the rest? Del Toro had more to say, and the setup was all there. Fatherhood, destiny, identity, and the fear of becoming what you were born to be. Hellboy 3 wasn't going to be a casual weekend watch. It was gearing up to be the finale to something bigger, the end of a man versus monster saga with twins involved. And fire. Lots of it.
3.
The Hellboy finale we never got. Guillermo del Toro wasn't vague about where Hellboy 3 was headed. Over the years, in interviews, fan panels, and Reddit AMAs, he opened up about the endgame he had in mind. And no, it wasn't going to be a happy wrap-up where everyone walks into the sunset. This was going to be big, brutal, and loaded. It was supposed to hurt. He wasn't aiming for a small farewell. He had this massive fire and brimstone finale in mind for Hellboy 3. Del Toro planned for Hellboy 3 to go full prophecy mode. Everything teased in the first two films, it would hit the fan. Hellboy would finally stop running from his fate and would finally embrace who and what he was meant to be. Not the quirky paranormal detective, not the moody guy with a cat obsession. This was where he would become the thing he was always scared of, the actual beast of the apocalypse. Remember that flaming crown hovering over his head in the first movie? The massive sword? The visions of Earth going up in flames? Those flashes were meant to pay off hard in the third chapter. Hellboy was going to unlock the full power that made everyone fear him. But it wasn't about going full evil. It was more tragic than that. It was about him making the worst call for the right reasons. Hellboy would have to become the very thing he spent his whole life running from. The Destroyer, the monster. Not because he wanted to, but because fate kept dragging him back to that same damn place. And when he took that crown, he would trigger a war, an all-out war between hell and humanity. And right in the middle of it all was Liz Sherman. She was pregnant in the Golden Army, and Del Toro didn't plan to sideline her. In fact, she was going to be more powerful than ever, but that came with its own problems. Liz wouldn't be the same woman from the earlier films, always doubting herself. She would tap into her full pyrokinetic powers, but that power would scare her. Not because of what she could do, but because of what Hellboy was turning into. Loving him while watching him slide closer to the end of the world was the conflict. She wasn't fighting against him. Instead, she was fighting for the man buried under the horns and fire. And then there were the twins. The last film teased their arrival, and Del Toro confirmed they were a big part of Hellboy 3. Those kids were going to be a big deal. One of them would embrace Hellboy's destructive side, the other, Liz's humanity. They were meant to represent the two halves of Hellboy himself, the conflict between damnation and redemption made literal. Their fate would tie directly into how the story ended, with Hellboy realizing he couldn't pass the curse forward. He would have to end it. It was going to be this messy, high-stakes family dynamic, a battle of nature versus nurture, played out through the fate of the world. The story would have gone big, like end of the world big. Ancient gods, monsters tearing through cities, prophecies lining up like dominoes. Hellboy, Liz, and the BPRD wouldn't just be trying to save the world anymore, they would be stuck deciding if it was even worth saving. Abe Sapien was going to be back, so was the rest of the team. And Del Toro wanted to dig deeper into Hellboy's past, where he came from, what he was really meant to do, and what kind of horror had been buried until now. The tone would have been way darker than anything before. Del Toro wanted this final film to hurt. Hellboy was going to die. He would become the beast he feared, lead the army of hell to Earth, and then ultimately destroy himself to save the world. Because deep down, he knew it was the only way to break the cycle. He was born to bring the end. but he would choose to stop it. Hellboy was built to be a weapon, but this would be his way of rejecting that label once and for all. And yeah, it would cost him everything. Visually, Del Toro wasn't holding back either. He talked about massive apocalyptic set pieces, scorched landscapes, armies of twisted hellspawn, and celestial horrors looming over the battlefield. And it wasn't meant to be cool. It was meant to feel heavy, like you were watching the end of the world unravel in real time. Hellboy 3 wasn't supposed to tie up loose ends. It was designed to burn everything down, beautifully, painfully, and with purpose. Del Toro had a finish line in mind, and from what he shared, it would have been one hell of a finale. But then the wheels fell off. Studios didn't want to cough up the cash. They were worried about how niche the fan base was. It didn't help that the second film, while praised, didn't print money. Del Toro needed a real budget to pull this off, and no one was ready to gamble. So Hellboy 3 stayed locked in Del Toro's head. The beast never rose, the sword never got drawn, and fans never got the send-off they deserved. The curse of the third movie. Hellboy 3's story is a mess of missed chances and a studio system that never really understood what it had on its hands. Even with a loyal fan base and 2 strong entries under its belt, the final chapter never got the go-ahead. And not for lack of trying. Del Toro really fought for Hellboy 3. For years, he kept knocking on doors, pitching the finale he knew fans were dying to see. Ron Perlman was ready to go. The audience was as ready as they could be. The first 2 films had built a solid cult following, and people wanted closure. But every time Del Toro brought it up, the studios gave him the same answer. Nope. First up, money. The Golden Army did all right at the box office, but it didn't break records. It did solid, but not the kind of haul that makes execs throw money at a sequel. Studios wanted big superhero numbers, and Hellboy wasn't delivering that kind of cash. It had a cult following, sure, but cult doesn't always mean profitable. Del Toro, on the other hand, wasn't trying to scale down. He wanted to go big, at least $120 million to do it right. Massive hellscapes, demonic wars, the full apocalypse. The story was too big to cut corners. That meant more money, more effects, more time. The studios refused. Then there was the rights mess. The franchise wasn't owned by a single studio. Hellboy was first made with Revolution Studios and distributed by Sony. Then the Golden Army landed at Universal. So now you have multiple players holding pieces of the puzzle, none of them fully in control. That kind of setup makes deals slow and complicated, and nobody likes waiting years just to sort out who gets what. Time didn't help either. While fans kept the dream alive online, Del Toro got busy. He started building Pacific Rim, then moved on to Crimson Peak, and eventually The Shape of Water, which won him an Oscar. His schedule filled up, and so did his focus. As time went on, fitting in Hellboy 3 became harder and harder. Ron Perlman was loyal to Del Toro's vision and made it clear he wouldn't come back without Del Toro. Meanwhile, Ron wasn't getting younger either. Putting on the full Hellboy look, the prosthetics, the suit, the big right hand took hours. Doing that again for months on end, with fight scenes and big action sequences, would not have been easy for a guy pushing 70. And without Del Toro, it wasn't worth it for him. And no Ron Perlman, no Hellboy, period. Fans didn't give up though. There were efforts to save it. There were petitions, campaigns, hashtags, all of it. Fans begged for Netflix or HBO to step in, but none of it went anywhere. Hollywood didn't budge, and every year that passed made it harder to bring the original crew back together. The window closed quietly. On top of that, Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy, started leaning in a different direction. He wanted to take the franchise back to its horror roots. That meant ditching Del Toro's mythic emotional arc and starting fresh. He was more interested in rebooting the whole thing than wrapping up the trilogy, and thus they moved on with a reboot nobody asked for. Finally, in 2017, Del Toro pulled the plug himself. After one last meeting with everyone involved, he made it official. Hellboy 3 wasn't happening. And that was that. So yeah, Hellboy 3 was right there, ready, mapped out, and full of potential. But in the end, Hellboy was just a big red demon, a half-told story, and a finale that never got to swing its sword. From Del Toro to disaster. By 2019, after years of waiting and 1,000 internet petitions, fans didn't get Hellboy 3. Instead, they got a reboot. New tone, new director, new actors, new everything. Neil Marshall took the reins. David Harbour, best known for playing Jim Hopper in Netflix's Stranger Things, put on the horns. And the goal was clear: make it darker, bloodier, and supposedly more faithful to the comics. On paper, that sounded fine. In reality, it fell flat on its face. This version had nothing to do with the old films. No Ron Perlman, no Del Toro, no connection to the emotional arc that fans had waited for years. It threw out the old world and started fresh, but with none of the charm. The tone was all over the place. The effects looked rough. The plot felt jumbled, like it was stitched together in a rush. It tried to push the R rating with gore and grit, but none of it landed with heart. Even David Harbour, who's solid in everything else, despite giving it his all, looked lost under all the makeup. It felt like he was stuck in a film that didn't know what it wanted to be. The critics went in on it, but the fans didn't take it well. They didn't bother showing up. Instead of welcoming a fresh take, people instantly started drawing lines between this version and Del Toro's world. And Del Toro's Hellboy won that fight every time. Where his film had depth, weird beauty, and emotional payoff, the reboot felt hollow. It made people miss the Del Toro films more and realize how much they actually liked what Del Toro had built, even more than they thought. The film barely made back its $50 million budget worldwide. The response from the team behind the reboot didn't help either. Harbour and Marshall both acknowledged that the fan base wasn't happy. There were statements about behind-the-scenes tension, rushed production, and studio interference. But by then, the damage was done. The reboot barely made its money back, and any hope for a new trilogy was gone. The reboot came and went. And for most people, it might as well have never happened. Ironically, the failure of the reboot did something Del Toro's films never could while they were in theaters. It turned them into legend. People started revisiting the old movies, praising the visual design, the lore, and the performances. Suddenly, the 2004 Hellboy and the Golden Army felt like lost art. Even folks who were lukewarm before started looking at them with new respect. And then came the 2024 reboot attempt, Hellboy the Crooked Man. Another swing at starting over. A different cast, smaller scale, and a tighter horror. It aimed closer to the original Seed of Destruction arc, focusing on moody folklore instead of bombastic fantasy. However, the responses were mixed. Critics saw improvement, but the buzz wasn't strong enough to reignite the fandom. Without Del Toro, Perlman, or that familiar blend of heart and horror, it still felt like something was amiss. At this point, fans aren't asking for more reboots. They were asking for what they were promised. The one where Hellboy crowns himself, raises hell, and goes down to save it all. That third movie might be gone for good, but thanks to every failed reboot, its legend keeps getting bigger. Marvelous verdict. I still think about Hellboy 3, not in a wishful, maybe someday kind of way, but in that bitter, we were robbed way. And yeah, I get it. Money talks. But man, what a waste. Hellboy was never about being a typical hero. That's what made the movies special. Del Toro took a comic book character and turned him into something mythic, something sad and strange and cool. And we were supposed to see him go full beast mode. But what we were left with is a big what could have been hanging in the air. Hellboy deserved better. The fans did too. It didn't deserve to fade out like this. But hey, maybe one day we will get that closure. Even if it takes an apocalypse to make it happen. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.